And we're back for the first time in 2021. Man, it's been a little while. I have to say I was hoping to get back towards the end of January, but it is what it is. We've had to move, a new studio. Some things have changed. Some things are still the same. It's the same blue channel at the same blue time. What has changed, obviously, we're going to get a series of new guests on the line this series. And I guess the biggest change right now is the fact that I'm wanting to include some of our listeners. So my next guest is actually a little bit of a guinea pig, but I've worded him up about it, and he's quite happy. But yeah, so I just during this time off, I've discovered an app called Clubhouse, which is really kind of cool. And I suggest that if people aren't on it, they get on it. And if you get on it, you find the blue corner and give it a follow. It basically allows like-minded people to discuss various topics, and I guess no topic is offhand. And the thing that surprised me the most is that there's a real etiquette on how people chat on this platform, right? I thought, if you get like 30 odd people in the same room, they're just going to talk over the top of one of another. But it's not the case. It's actually kind of nice. So I've asked my next guest to join Clubhouse. I think he's going to join in the next 24 hours or so. So that'll be kind of cool. But look, let's get back to it and we'll get straight into it. So the person that I've invited for the first episode of this year is a guy I actually wanted to get in last year, but time kind of ran out, and I'm kind of glad it did in a sense, because now we actually got something really cool to talk about. He's a black belt, I believe, under the legacy BJJ. Obviously, we spoke to Tiago last series. He runs his own MMA gym, Carioti MMA, and he's now putting his hand up for a pro boxing fight, and that is obviously the cool thing that I really wanted to talk to him about. But I'm talking about none other than Alex Carioti himself. How have you been, and how has the start of 2021 been treating you?
Man, honestly, pretty good. January always for gyms is typically a pretty good time. Everyone decides after New Year's that they're going to jump back into the gym and get to training. So I kind of gear up and I get really excited to see all the new faces. But what surprised me this year is we had a lot of fighters, people who want to fight or people who were fighting from other gyms come to our team. So January saw actually a turn in the competitive team in a big way, which I didn't expect. So that in itself is just super exciting for me.
And how have you found businesses come about now? Because I know obviously, there was a period where all gyms were shut last year. And then even when they reopened, I think people were a little hesitant because, some people are obviously big on the whole wearing a mask, not wearing a mask, and then you go to a gym, and especially in the BJJ sense, I guess, you're not only, not wearing a mask, you're getting quite comfortable with one another. So do you find that's affected business in any sense?
No, we had the opposite effect. So when the gym opened, people were tearing down my door to get back inside. My guys couldn't have cared less. I know we followed all the restrictions. We kept the class numbers down. We did the sanitizing, the change room rules. But my guys were killing each other to get on the mats. Even when we did short intervals to keep the group down low, guys were trying to get in every session they could. My guys just want to train, so they weren't fussed about it. Like I said, we didn't test the rules, but if they could have, my guys would have. I guarantee you that they couldn't have cared less.
But having said that, have you implemented any new rules to the gym, or is it because when people from overseas talk to me now, I'm like, we are pretty much back to business, right? Yeah. Like I honestly, I don't even know now. I haven't even looked at the stats anymore, but I don't even think we've had a case in a long while.
Like almost 30 days now. So essentially, we just always followed the government restrictions. So sign in, sign out, 2 people in the change room, 30 people on the mats. It's stupid to try social distancing when we're going to grapple. It didn't make sense. I think our kind of gyms fell in this little loophole where we didn't operate like weights gyms. We didn't operate like other recreational activities. So I think we were never managed correctly anyway. To say you can have any amount of people per class when we're on top of each other, it's like watching people sanitize their hands before and after class after they've just been grappling seemed so ridiculous to me. But we just did what we had to do. And honestly, like I said, the business went up. So I know not every business can say that, but I think for a lot of martial arts gym, it actually worked out better for us, which is an odd predicament.
And have you ever had a scare?
Nah, we got nothing on our end. Absolutely nothing. We didn't even get any members, friends, or family that had it. I think really like the numbers considered the size of the people in our state or country are actually really low. And when you compare it to other countries, we did fantastically well. And people who got it, but we had nothing local.
And what, you personally know someone who's had it?
Yeah. So I knew a few people, 3 people who got it. They said it just was a really rough week of sickness, and then they started coming good. They just said the cough was horrendous. They said it hurt bad, and they felt like trash. But none of them even gave it to their own families. So I guess we got lucky.
Which is kind of crazy. I mean, I had a friend in Vegas, the same thing. He finally got it, and he was talking about that. It was the first 3 days. He was like, it was like death around the corner, right? Like he literally said like he felt like he was going to die.
Yeah.
The fever was high. But then he said like by the end of the week, he said like that whole smell and taste thing was a little bit, still lingering around. But he at the end, he goes, mate, if I can sign up for one of those, where they actually inject you with the virus and they pay you like $8,000 so they can do the studies, he's like, sign me up. He's like, I'll do it. Like, which is kind of crazy, but I mean, it's just we live worlds apart on that, I guess, right?
And he's not really the type that's at risk, right? So my friends that got it, exercise and they're fighters or whatever, they were never going to have a big problem out of it. They're not the people that are making up the bulk of the statistics.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what I said to Eric when he came on. I said it really shows that, having good health, because I find that people that, same thing over there, like they're pro athletes. And he said, for the guys that got it, he said it really wasn't that much of an issue at all.
Nah, otherwise the deaths would be 10 times the amount, right?
So anyway, let's talk a little bit more about you. We'll get straight to the point as well. You obviously were a former podcaster by yourself. You've decided to give that a little bit of a rest.
Yeah.
What was your experience with that?
Oh, just so fun. There's nothing like, what I love the most about it? I had general intrigue about people that, you have questions about individuals that you never really get to ask in genuine conversation. So when you get them for an hour and a half on a seat, I actually got to delve into a lot of things I'd always wanted to know, particularly with my own coaches. When I sat down with even Tiago or Eddie or whatever, I got to just ask some stuff that I just always wondered. So I would actually sit there so intrigued just to listen to the stories. So for an hour and a half, I was locked in there. I was fully locked in. I was enjoying it. I can't wait to do it again.
See, and that's kind of what I like about this, right? Like I try to get different guests each week, and like as I said to you before we jumped on, I really don't have an agenda when it comes to this kind of stuff. I like to just have a general conversation, and sometimes the conversations kind of go where you thought they might, but then other times like they just go left field, and I'm happy to go along with that, right? I really enjoy the fact that it just becomes this general conversation of two minds that kind of meet in the middle. Sometimes they don't, I guess. I don't know. But so where did your, I guess, journey start? And obviously, as I said in the intro, like, you're a black belt in BJJ. So I'm assuming that was probably your start at some point.
No, not even close. Not even close. First black belt was Taekwondo when I was a kid. So I did my first 5 years in Taekwondo, got my black belt in that. As soon as I finished with Taekwondo, I moved actually straight into almost 11 years of fencing. And I did that very, very high competitive. I did world championships. I did about 12 World Cups. I went to the Commonwealth Championship. I was on the national team for, I think, almost 5 years. So I tried to do that as high a level as possible internationally. Then from there, I switched into jiu-jitsu, boxing, kickboxing, everything.
So let's peel it back though. Fencing.
Yeah.
Like what originally got you interested in that? Because I always find, I mean, I don't know much about fencing, but I kind of find it a little bit of a quirky sport, right?
Very, very. But I wasn't allowed to do boxing when I was a kid because I was obsessed with boxing from when I was a little kid. Obsessed with it. My room was full of boxing books. I had Ali signed poster, you name it. So every chance I would get, I would try box, but my parents said no on the boxing front because they knew if I boxed, I'd want to fight because all I did was fight my brothers and my friends and everything. Not in a bad way, just if my friends ever wanted to rumble or put on gloves, I'd be the first to do it. So fencing was a way of doing a combat sport, and it was a way of doing an individual sport because I hated team sports to death when I was a kid. Really hated them. So they're kind of two married together, and I ended up kind of excelling in it. And so I always did boxing in the background, but my parents never let me really dive into it the way I wanted to.
And was it ever like a goal to try to go Olympics with the fencing?
Yeah, absolutely. By the time I got to 21, I had to make that decision if I was going to try for the next Olympic run. But because of the way things were, the costs involved, the time it was going to take, my heart wasn't in it enough to put in what it was going to take to make it. That's the truth. After I did my last World Championship, then I went to India for the Commonwealth Championships, and then I did my last Nationals. I had a bit of a blowout with the New South Wales Federation, which didn't help me. So everything was in a bit of a sour note, and I thought, you know what, I'm done with this. And when I walked away from it, I just never came back, ever. I just kind of turned my back on it for good.
Crazy. And then you say you came across to BJJ.
Yeah. So obviously the first thing everyone does when I was in high school is you watch UFC. So my friend says, hey, there's this Brazilian guy who wears a gi or he wears a kimono or whatever, karate outfit, and he's beating the shit out of everyone. We all watch it together and think, need to practice this stuff. So we're all wrestling on the ground trying to figure out this jiu-jitsu thing. We thought when you put someone in your guard, you squeeze them really tight with your legs, and that's what he must be doing. So we're full into that. And then what happened was I started kickboxing. And then maybe 2-3 months into that, I booked myself an MMA fight. I hadn't done any grappling before. I just figured it would be a great idea because I watched it on TV. So my friend, who was a white belt at the time, decided in his lounge he would give me a lesson on how to do triangles and a basic, I think it was maybe a sweep from full guard. So I rocked up to VT1 after doing, I think, 2 lounge room sessions and told Liam, the owner, I said, look, I've got a fight booked for next weekend for 2 weeks' time. And he's like, okay, where you been training? I was like, oh, I haven't been training. He's like, okay, so like, what's your plan? Like, how are you going to get your training in order for the fight? I was like, well, that's why I'm here. He's like, you do realize 2 weeks isn't enough that you're ready. I was like, nah, don't worry about it. I'll be fine. He's like, you sure? I was like, yeah, I'll be fine. Thank God the event fell through. Thank God. So I did 3 jiu-jitsu classes and went in a jiu-jitsu competition that weekend instead. And I got obliterated. I got subbed in the first minute. And then after that, I was like, all right, I'm going to do this jiu-jitsu stuff. And that's what started, actually.
I was waiting for Liam to say, so who's your coach? And you're like, just a mate. Like,
yeah, he's landed a white belt.
Right. So, I mean, it's kind of crazy. I mean, but you have had, obviously, an MMA fight since then. Obviously, that got cancelled. Like, was it all that you thought it would be cracked out to be? So, like, obviously, you know, people always go in, and I guess even with your friend, right? Like, we always have these people, I guess, that have got that advice and this and that. But, like, it's just different. Once you actually step in there, it's different. I mean, I would even say with the whole Paige Van Zandt experience, right? Like she was talking about like potentially getting hit by shins and kicks, you know, when people were asking her like, have you ever been punched by bare knuckles? And she's like, well, I've been hit by shins and stuff. But I felt like that first fight she had, she was kind of a little lost until the last round, right? And I feel like it was a case of that she was getting hit with stuff she hadn't been hit before. And it took her, I guess, the first 4 rounds to really kind of understand like, okay, this is what it is now. So going back to your first experience, was it what you thought it would be? What were kind of some of the thoughts going into it? And yeah, as I say, what was your first kind of 30 seconds like?
Yeah, look, I think on that topic with Paige, if you look at, you can't be, even if you're a great boxer, if you fight a bare knuckle boxer who's only bare knuckle box, you're going to have a lot of trouble with him. Look at Artem Lobov, who's fought in always little gloves, versus Paulie Malignaggi, who is a world champion in professional boxing. And the thing of Artem beats him. Like it doesn't work that strictly. So when I've competed, obviously fencing for 10 years, and I did boxing fights, kickboxing fights, jiu-jitsu, and I figured it would all marry together and it would just come out. It doesn't. MMA is its own thing completely. The mindset when you're in there is a lot more aggressive than I have in any of the other disciplines, particularly jiu-jitsu and boxing. I try to be very calm. MMA, I felt very aggressive, almost like in danger in there. So I needed to be the alpha in there, which I've never really had that as much in combat sports. there was also that fear of when the punches started throwing of how small the gloves really were. I really got a sense when he hit me with the first one. So the fight started was I opened with a head kick, but I kicked him in the neck, so it was a bit too low. He chased me. I caught his kick. I dropped him with the right hand, and I got on top trying to consolidate the position. And he started hammer fisting me really hard in the side and actually the back of the head. And he hammer fisted me so hard in the back of the head, I almost went out in his guard. So when I orientated myself, you'll see in the video if you ever watch it on YouTube, I stopped for a few.
I've seen it. I've watched it.
It takes me like a few seconds to be like, where am I? And then I realized in that moment, I don't want him hitting me ever again with those little gloves. And then from then on, I did everything I could to make sure he didn't fucking touch me for the next 2 rounds. But it was a feeling of survival in there. I never felt that in anything I've ever competed in. But once I felt like, man, one shot, he could put me out, I started to go to, there's no room for mistake going on like from here on in. And it just changed me to super aggressor, which I'm normally not in fights.
See, I can totally agree because when I jumped in, it was the same thing, right? Like we're talking about survival mode. When people always ask what the experience was like, I mean, mine was totally different in the sense of that I went in there, I always say I wanted to touch gloves and I wanted to dance a little bit, right? And obviously my opponent had a different strategy. He was like, yeah, we'll touch gloves, but I'm going to throw straight after, right? And he's literally like clocked me one. And the sensation I got out of that was literally, I felt like I always say it was like a vacuum. And even to the point, like I didn't even know a ref was in there anymore. It was like literally a kind of like white padded walls for me. Yeah. And it was me and him. That's it. Yeah. Like I don't remember anything else. Yeah. The crowd was gone. Everything was, and that's what I talk about survival mode. It was like literally I'd been clocked that hard, probably concussed. I don't know. Yeah. But it was like literally all my senses disappeared apart from my eyes. That's it. Like I just like everything else wasn't even there anymore, right? And it wasn't until I submitted him with the anaconda, which will impress you, I guess. But it wasn't until then and the ref pulling me off him that then all of a sudden, like the crowd cheering and stuff came back like a tidal wave. It was like a slow, right? And it was, but like for that, you know, I won't say split second, it was really like I go, this must be like what survival mode is, right? Like you're literally in this zone that...
Yeah, you just immediately hone out anything that doesn't assist your immediate needs. Your immediate needs is to focus on the individual in front of you, so your mind just blocks out anything else that's not relevant at the time. The only reason I definitely knew the ref was there was because he was in my ear calling me a lot of really bad names, and at one time I thought he was going to bite my ear because I was in his full guard and he's screaming in my ear calling me a coward and a bitch. He's out telling me to be a man and do all this stuff. Like it was pretty bad. So I looked up at the ref and I was like, are you going to do something about this? Because I honestly, he was growling in my ear. So I thought he was going to bite me. And I thought, what a weird turn that would be. So I only knew the ref was there because I was kind of trying to like see if he was going to stop the guy trying to abuse me for whatever reason. I think he was getting upset that it was on the ground, that I wasn't standing back up. And he was trying to taunt me into standing back up. But the way we got to the ground was I punched him in the face and he fell on his back. It's not like I took him down. So I didn't really get that plan of his, but it was a very odd experience for a fight.
Plus for you also, being a black belt, you're probably more comfortable on the ground anyway, right?
To be honest, I felt comfortable everywhere in that fight. I really had it in my mind that I wanted to submit him because I'd done so many striking fights. It was my intention of that fight was to go in there, submit. I even said it in the post-fight interview. That's what I wanted to do. That was my goal. I think it was good of him to take that fight in the first place. And I kind of had it in my mind. Like he had 9 fights. I had 0 fights, but I didn't want to knock him out. I know it sounds bad, but at the time I was competing pure jits and I wasn't even sparring at all, any striking, because I was in this phase where I wasn't really happy with punching people in the face. So I had the Damian Maia mentality in that fight that I wanted to try finish it with doing as little damage to him as possible, actually. So the idea was always to choke him from the start.
Crazy. And so like now, obviously, because you kind of do all facets of combat sports, obviously, as you mentioned, you know, have done a lot of BJJ comps. You've had your MMA fight. You're obviously, even though we're going to talk about your pro boxing debut, which is coming up at the end of the month, you've obviously had a lot of amateur fights. Yep. In regards to preparation, is it same same for everything, or like what are some
Not
of the
even
major?
close.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm going with it. Is like what are some of the differences like for you getting ready for say a BJJ comp compared to like an MMA fight, compared to now a boxing fight? Oh, I don't say now because as I said, you've had plenty of amateur fights, but like, what are some of the major differences for you?
I got to switch mindset depending on what I'm competing in. Jits, I'm looking at 10-minute rounds. So it's about a mindset of control and about mental endurance. With jiu-jitsu, you really have to control the matches. You're doing multiple matches a day. The way I have to prepare myself for the distance of the day, especially because as a brown belt, I competed gi, no gi, and then open weight in both. So having 4 divisions, let's say you have 9, 10 matches a day, it's just a different person. See, in fencing, you might do 5 plus another 5, 6, 11 matches in the day, and then you'll do teams at night. So sometimes a comp could take 13 hours to get done. So I was very used to multiple matches. Finish a match, put it behind you, get to the next one. Boxing, you just need to be really, really good for that 12 minutes. You just need to be on. So it's all about intensity with striking for me. With jiu-jitsu, it's definitely about an idea of, like I said, longevity even for the day. But boxing is just intensity. If you can put the person away from the bell, that's what you want to be doing.
And in regards to say like even weight, are you happier to change weight classes like depending on what sport you're competing in, or are you always going to try to match that same weight?
Nah, big time. So with the striking, because of the 24-hour weigh-in, I go down to 70 or under. In jiu-jitsu, I'll be around the 74 mark.
And which one do you enjoy more?
I hate making weight for every single type of athletic anything. I just dislike making weight. But every single time I've been lazy and gone up a weight, you get a sense of how like big and strong they are, and you just go right back to your little weight division again.
Well, I guess, and I mean, that was what happened last weekend, right? Like in the sense of the main event, like I kind of go, you look at Izzy and when he's at that right weight, which obviously to him is middleweight, he just looks unbeatable. He's that talented that you could kind of go, well, as I said, there was talks about John Jones and him, and then, you get someone a little heavier. And I mean, it was a massive step because when you look at like most of the weight classes, it's only 10 pounds, obviously from middleweight up to light heavy, you're looking at 20 pounds. So it is a bigger step, but I felt that the weight was really the determining factor, right?
Yeah, I felt like Jan didn't respond to Izzy the way that they were expecting him to. The middleweights, don't know, Jan was falling for the fakes. He was playing the game, but the shots weren't doing the kind of damage that you used to seeing from Izzy. As much as you say anything you want about his power, Izzy's been knocking everyone out. That's just the truth of it. But Jan just kind of ate them, and it didn't seem to faze him. It didn't seem to bother him. It didn't seem to throw him off course. Jan tried to win every round of every fight, where I've seen him in the middleweights with Costa. Costa just broke kind of mentally and started like receding to Israel striking. Jan didn't. He just kept trying to punch him in the face because maybe it was the impact doesn't transfer. Maybe Jan felt confident because he was such a bigger individual in there. Whatever it was, it just didn't work.
Well, I've always said that though, like it's twofold, right? Like the first one is you're hitting someone who can hit you a lot harder, right? Because they got a lot of weight behind them. But the other thing is on their end, as you just mentioned, is like you're now hitting him with something that he's been hit with harder, right? Like he's used to something harder. So it's just like, but I especially when they got it to the ground, like I just kind of felt like hey, I mean, look, Jan's got, good BJJ skills, but like I think having that extra weight, it was just a lot harder to get him off, right? Like you just couldn't shift that weight.
Yep, and it's not like Jan was trying to progress his position and creating the openings for Izzy. He was locking it down. He took a deep underhook. He pushed that shoulder down hard. He took his head all the way over Izzy's head, and he just sat on him. He just almost went like perpendicular on the boy and just sat him there. That's all he had to do. He didn't throw anything more than big shots until he got to full guard, and then he was able to throw some elbows from there. But in the half guard and side positions, he played safe. He made that weight a factor. Does that make sense? By playing positions and using his weight to his advantage, which I thought was very smart.
And then just do enough that you don't get stood up, right? Like it really is. Just do enough. Since we're talking about last weekend's fight, what do you think of the co-main?
Co-main was Megan and Amanda.
Yes.
Oh man, I feel like the moment got to Megan. I feel like just in that moment, it just seemed like she just froze a little. I think if she'd gotten past the first onslaught, she would have maybe loosened up and come good. But I just feel like she didn't switch on. I don't think there's that much skill disparity in the striking that it showed. I don't think she should just walk over and just punch her in the face and knock her out. That shouldn't happen. Megan's a great striker, but she didn't strike.
See, where I think, like, with Megan, the one thing is she's probably one of the biggest girls of that division. I just feel like she doesn't quite use her size. And what I mean by that is obviously, like, you look at, like, your John Joneses, right? And they're long, but they're long because they know how to fight long.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one thing with Megan at the moment. I just find that she's so big, but she still hasn't quite worked out how to fight big, if that makes sense.
Yeah, to be honest, there's a few things I watch her do that I've always been confused with some of her approach, especially on the ground and her way she stands back up and stuff. But then again, I can have a fighter that I've trained and he does something one way in the gym every time, and then on fight night he does something I've never seen him do before. So I'm not going to say it's her trainer or her. It can just happen. You can have those mind blanks in fights, but she does one or two things where I wonder if that's the smartest way for her build.
And obviously, we'll pick up one more fight of that card, which is obviously the Coco main event, which was the third title fight, which ended in a weird kind of sequence. What were your thoughts on that fight?
Look, everyone's getting on Aljo for wearing the belt. He's the champion. He can wear the belt. However he won it, they agreed to a rule set. Jan broke the rule set. He's the champ. Aljo's the champ. Simple as that. If he was allowed to cheat and Aljo was allowed to cheat, maybe Aljo would be the champ if he could illegally knee him in the head on the ground, right? But the rules are the rules and you broke the rules. So Aljo shouldn't hide from the fact that he's a champion, but they should rematch. If Aljo didn't rematch him, I'd have no respect for him, but I can't not let the guy wear the belt. He's the champion. It's simple as that. I think Jan got done in by his corner there. I think Jan looked up to his corner. His corner said throw it, and he threw it because he was asking his corner if it was legal, and they said yes.
But I guess that's the dispute right now is like, how can you be champion and not know the rules that you even have to ask your corner? I mean, look, I'm in two thoughts about the whole thing. Obviously, it was clearly illegal. I think it's unfair when people are like giving Aljo a lot of grief right now.
Not his fault.
You know, it's not his fault, but a lot of people point in case to the John Jones, Anthony Smith fight, and they're like, well, look, Smith did it. And I'm like, yeah, but how did it work out for him, right? Like, obviously, and the way I see it is now fighters are seeing it as a business, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so, like, even for this rematch right now, even if he continued lost, would they give him a rematch if he lost? And two, even if he did, he would come in as the challenger again, right? Where this way, regardless of how he did it, like, he got his win bonus. It's a straight paycheck there. And two, the next fight, he's coming in as the champion. So in my eyes, it made business sense for him not to continue. Whether there was a little bit of acting involved and all this, look, I felt like he kind of handled it the right way. He kind of put the belt down in the middle of the cage and walked out. Obviously, since then, he's posted a lot of photos of him like holding the belt, and I think that got under a few people's skin. But at the end of the day, I'm the same. He didn't do anything wrong. Do I think that in cases like that, they should have maybe just vacated the belt? I think that could be a definite option, right? Kind of like, you know, that it becomes a case of like someone missing weight for a title fight, and it's just like they can't win the belt that way, right? Could that potentially be an option?
Think about this. If you make it through your jiu-jitsu bracket, you get to the final and your guy no-shows it, you win. If you get there and he reaps you, you win. If he doesn't want to play by the rules that govern the champion, then he's not the champion and you are, because you showed up, you didn't do anything illegal, you made weight, you trained, you deserve it. If he didn't do any of his requirements, he's not the champion, right? I think to get on a guy who made a very clever decision to make a considerable more money to feed and support his family, if you're going to sit on your couch and begrudge that, then you're a fucking idiot. Because if I got $100,000, probably way more than that, to roll on the ground and hold my head when someone illegally kneed me, and knowing that coming into that fight, I was clearly like not going to be as good as I could be fighting, why the fuck would I get back up? That sounds a lot like Jan's problem, not like my problem. So,
Exactly. And as Aljo said, like if he would have continued, it would have just been ego, right? It would have just been ego going,
finished bad and ruined his career.
right. And it really is. And as I said, the next fight, he's going to be on a bigger pay packet and he's probably going to get pay-per-view hits, right? So to me,
Good for him. He didn't cheat. Good
it makes total sense, you know.
That's right.
And as you said, rules are there for a reason. So I
How he doesn't know them, I don't know. How he does not know the knee rule, I do not know. That's mind-blowing.
Well, and this is the thing, because it's all like lost in translation as well. Like, I don't even know, like, were they saying knee as in like knee him, or were they saying knee as in like saying the knees on the ground? Like, that's the other thing that I'm thinking. Like you know, like I'm just saying, because you're hearing all these things, and it's like, what was actually being said? You know, like, because I don't speak Russian either, so I don't know what's going on.
Think about this: in the main event, Jan was trying to get security work from Izzy by the end of the fight. So obviously when it comes to translation and things being spoken across a cage, a lot's lost.
That's true. So I want to ask you as well, though, like you're obviously in the middle of fight camp or getting towards the end of fight camp. But obviously you're the head coach of Carioti MMA. And I've been seeing on the socials now, you've actually got a fighter competing this Friday.
Yep.
I mean, she looks pretty experienced in the sense of K1 and Muay Thai. I think she's had 19, 20
23
wins.
fights now. Yeah, I think she's 20 or 21 wins for 23 fights around there.
Right.
Yeah.
So she seems pretty experienced, but this will be her MMA debut. Right?
So she's had one MMA fight with a really cool story behind it. She went to the Oceania Championships for K1, which she won. And then I said, look, the opponent's pulled out for MMA in a couple of days' time. I think it was maybe a week's time. Do you want to jump in and fight MMA? She's never done a lick of grappling or wrestling. They, again, lounge room taught her how to try do a few things. She jumped in there and actually lost a split decision. So she fought incredibly well for a girl that every time she got taken down, they were just like, just stand up. So she just tried to fight her way up with no experience. So when I watched that fight, I really thought, you got to wonder what she'd do with a month of training, with 6 months of training, right? Where I feel she lost the fight was the girl was actually down on the ground in front of her during a scramble, and her corner yelled to jump the back and try choke her. So she jumped the back. She didn't know about hooks or anything. It just fell right over the top. I feel like if she just struck, or if she had a better corner that day, maybe she would have won. But I think for her it was just fun. She didn't care if she won or lost. But you got to wonder if someone can do that much with zero grappling training, what they're capable of with some good training, right?
And how is her training going right now?
Incredible. It's just, she's got to be the hardest worker in the gym by a bit. Like, everyone works hard, but she just has that extra she gives. She's very talented to boot, which doesn't hurt. Like, I feel when it comes to MMA as opposed to jiu-jitsu, certain people are made for MMA and certain people aren't. A lot of body types and mentalities can do jiu-jitsu and be successful, right? It's a bit broader. With MMA, you just have to be a certain type of individual to be good at MMA, and I feel like she's that certain type of individual.
And I mean, this is kind of like a strange predicament that you're in, right? Because I've spoken to coaches who have, say, multiple fighters in fight camp, or even in some cases on the same fight card. So you have to, like, you know, divide your time a little bit between fighters and so forth. But I've never actually spoken to someone who's in fight camp for one of their fighters, yet they're in fight camp for themselves as well. What is that experience like? Like, does it make things a little tougher? Does it make things a little easier?
No, just tougher.
In what sort of ways?
This is without a doubt been the hardest camp for me by a mile. So last week I had 2 kickboxers on. I'm getting 2 boxers ready that are fighting with me in April. 3 boxers now. I had Jacinta. We put a lot of attention to this pro fight. Then obviously I got my kid now, which is the first fight camp I've done with a kid. And then running the gym. The gym's never been busier. So at the moment, I've never had a fight camp be as stressful as this one. No way.
And you don't find that maybe sometimes, like, concentrating on a fighter takes your mind off your task to give you a little bit of release?
No, not release, because I bury myself emotionally, physically, and mentally so much into their training that if I hold pads or I spend 2 hours with them and then I try to train myself, I'm usually empty by that time. So by the time I wrap up working with all the fighters and then I jump on the bag myself, I actually have to sit down for a good 15 minutes and just close my eyes or stare into nothingness to even have enough mental energy to train myself. That's been the big issue at the moment.
And do you still find that you've been able to give her I guess, your full undivided attention, or have you now put people in place to kind of take some of the responsibility, I guess?
Nah, I've taken it full with her. So don't get me wrong, she has a very good kickboxing coach she works with. She has a wrestling coach she works with. All the students always chipping into her training, but I would always favor her training over mine anyway. So my finger's been very on the pulse with her every day.
Crazy. And speaking about wrestling, you guys have now partnered up, right, with the Wrestling Foundation?
Correct.
Yeah. How did that all take place?
So essentially, if you know anything about the scene of wrestling in New South Wales, it's very hard to get a wrestling program started. Reason being that the people you have to pick from are typically very good wrestlers themselves, and they come into your gym and they want to train you to be like wrestlers. The jiu-jitsu guys do about 2 weeks of it, get their fill of it. They don't want to do it anymore. Someone who's trying something for the first time is going to jump into a wrestling class. By the time you've done the 35-minute warm-up, they're over it. So we had 4 different coaches and 4 different times it started with a bang, and then every week there were less and less people, so there were so few people that we couldn't run the program. Training was just too hard. It was literally just too grueling. They didn't want to be Olympic wrestlers. They just wanted to learn wrestling. So the Wrestling Foundation started a grassroots program where they build wrestlers up from the very basic, literally from how to stand. They don't let any live wrestling until you've a grade 2, which means you've done up to 24 weeks of wrestling already. And they train you to be competent as opposed to really fit and work really hard, which is, I feel like, where it had been lost in the past. So they're creating a following now that is creating probably the biggest wrestling community in New South Wales ever. And they're growing so rapidly now that it's something you obviously want to get on board on. For my own selfish reasons of wanting to get much better at wrestling, to want to teach wrestling, because they allow you to teach it, because it's a program where they teach you and then you teach it, as opposed to them coming in and controlling it. But they're creating a wrestling community, which means MMA as a whole in New South Wales is going up, which means my stock and my profession and the level is going up, which I love the thought of that.
See, and it's crazy where you talk about that you were losing people in the class because it is so grueling, right? And I've always said, like, I find that wrestling is the one thing that we're weakest at, and not even New South Wales, I would say nationally, right? We just, when you look at the states and they have it all through out their schooling systems and stuff, I say it's the one thing we miss. But it's when people ask me what the best base is for MMA, I also say it's wrestling, and for 2 reasons. And the first is you dictate where that fight goes. And secondly is exactly that grueling mentality, right? So I always say it's funny that you see these wrestlers, and even if they're in a bad spot, they have this mentality. And I think that's the important factor of the whole wrestling thing to kind of overcome. You know what I'm saying? So like a classic example, and I've said this to a few people, is I had a talk. I don't know if you ever knew Paulie. He was a boxing coach, and we had a talk about it. And he said, yeah, it's the same thing. He goes, like with BJJ, for instance, like if you feel like your limb's about to break, you've got a way out, right? Like you tap, you know, I mean, I know that there's some people that the ego gets involved and they say they'll black out before they tap out. But generally speaking, it says if you're in a tough spot, there is a way out. Where with wrestling, the mentality is there is no way out. You keep grueling, you keep fighting. And I think, you know, that really plays a lot when it comes to like the mentality, especially of the champions as well. Like you see a lot of them, they have a heavy wrestling background.
Also remember, in wrestling, unlike jiu-jitsu, unlike in boxing, you can't step back, you can't stall, you can't waste time, you can't hold position. It's work is promoted. When work is promoted as one of the like tenets to being a good wrestler, you develop a mentality of wanting to break people with your work rate, where that exists in boxing and jits, but it isn't mandatory. In jits, I can hold up the first 8 minutes of the match and come good in the last 2. In boxing, I can circle the ring and I can avoid my opponent. I can burn 2 rounds out of 12 easy. You cannot do it in wrestling. There's only fight. There's only forward in wrestling. So you don't have a back out. You don't have a stop. It doesn't make sense. There's only fight in wrestling. So that's all they learn.
And do you think Khabib's the best to ever do it?
See, you know what the problem is? You get a sense of how good they are depending on who they fight. Does that make sense? Like Roy Jones never gets the credit he deserves because there was never that person to test him and him to overcome. By the time people did beat him, he was on the tail end. So you have no sense of how good he was when he was good because he demolished everyone. Khabib's destroyed everyone to a point where you got to wonder, like, I wanted to see him get tested and overcome, but he smashed him so bad. He's either better than you even think, or he just came in an era where maybe it won't solidify his greatness. But God, he's got to be in the discussion. He's got to be the top 3 discussion.
But I mean, like some of the opponents he's faced, I mean, they're not slouches.
No, they're
right?
top of the top, but they haven't tested him. So you just don't know the depth of his like skill. Maybe he just got them where he was good every time and the fight went his way. And you know what I mean? Like, at least when you see, like, it was kind of like Tyson had this air of he's got to be the best ever until he was tested and he failed. And then he lost that air of greatness. He was always a killer, but he's not considered even in the conversation at the top. Ali lost and came back and won, and then came back and won the belt again, and then came back and won the belt again. So you have a sense of his greatness because he showed that resilience and test of time, and he fought over 3 generations. And Khabib's come in, kind of had a really weird time period of years of being injured, missing main fights. We don't know who this guy is. And he's had 3 years of just straight blasting the entire division. So, and now he's quit. So you kind of, it's a different one. At least GSP did it over time. GSP had those tests. He overcame them. Then he had, like, you know what I mean? We followed his career over years. So in your mind, you had always told yourself GSP was the best or Anderson was the best. Khabib, I feel like, is a few fights away from saying, hey, it's definitely me. Because then you got to argue Cejudo, right? If you're talking like combat athletes. But if you're talking best fighter of all time, Khabib has to be in that argument right at the top.
I wasn't necessarily saying best fighter. I was more just talking specifically on the wrestling, you know, like that he's the best wrestler that we've seen.
Oh, no. Cejudo would be the best wrestler. Because of the Olympic gold, you'd say by merit he would be. Daniel Cormier, and that's up top. Who's used their wrestling the best ever in MMA? Yeah, Khabib.
Yeah, crazy. And when you talk about like the Ali conversation, you know, obviously he's up there in the greatest sort of talk, but obviously you got Floyd. Different era.
Yeah.
How would you see that?
You know why Floyd will never be considered the greatest, even though by all arguments he absolutely should be? He ducked the fight with Pacquiao when it mattered. And that's why he'll never get respected, because Ali fought everyone at their best. He fought Frazier 3 times. He fought Norton twice. He fought Foreman when he was undefeated, young, powerful, and he finished him. What has Floyd done? He just decisions everyone. He's decisioned all his fights. He avoided Pacquiao like the plague. He made excellent fighters look really novice. Like what he did to Marquez was unbelievable after time off. But the Pacquiao fight's always a stain for him. You fought Pacquiao after his prime when you had the match there 5 years earlier, and he went to such lengths to avoid the fight with Pacquiao that it almost made him seem like there was a reason why he was so scared of Manny. So then to come out and beat him now when it didn't have the same weight or value, it's very hard to argue he's the best of all time. Like I said, people will rate someone like a Chavez or a Duran or a Holmes or someone, like I said, that had a more storied career where they fought the best at the best time, and they'll actually rate them over Floyd.
Yeah, right. I mean, I guess the only thing is, and you're right, he did, I guess, pick timings of fights. However, like he didn't really pick fights. I mean, when you look at his resume in that 50-0, like he has pretty much he has pretty much fought everyone there is to fight, right? Did he pick the times to fight him in? Sure.
But not like Manny. He fought the other guys at good times, but the Manny fight was a clear ducking. 5 years of avoiding Manny at all costs. Maybe a little longer, to be honest, but 5 clear years of avoiding the best pound for pound fighter in the world. The greatest beat everyone. That's why they're the greatest to ever do it. Floyd didn't do that. So that's why people just don't give him that mantle, where really he really should. Look at his boxing skills. Like, how can you argue anyone's actually been a better pure boxer than Floyd ever? You know what I mean? His comprehension of boxing is might never be seen again. But you got to fight Manny in his prime.
And so I guess from there we'll go into your little boxing debut now. I wouldn't even say little. I mean, it's on the card to be on, right? Like it's kind of crazy. How did that all come about?
So I was actually looking to go pro the day after Jacinta. So she's fighting Friday night. I was going to fight Saturday night because I told myself it was time to get the pro boxing thing finally done. And then I actually got a phone call out of the blue from someone I'd never spoken to, asking if I wanted to be on the card and fight so-and-so, just completely out of the blue. I don't know how he got my number. I don't know how it all worked out. And I just said yes on the spot, and we're in.
Have you been sent a contract, or was it a bad prank?
No. Well, look, we're on there. We're like, thank God the guy's been in contact with me. He's been giving me all the details. He's advertised the fight or whatever. So we're going ahead. But no contract yet, actually. Good point.
Ooh.
Ooh.
How many days have we got? I don't know. I don't even know. But yeah, so so obviously you definitely wanted to turn into pro boxing. Is this something that you're then, I guess, gonna start chasing, or is it more or less that you're happy to have a few and put it on the mantelpiece?
Yeah, look, so I've got that one on the 31st, then on the 16th of April, 16 days later, I'm already booked again. So once I get 2 pro fights done, you got to kind of take a stock take of where you're at and see what you want to do about it. I think with such a big fight in my lap in 3 weeks, I don't think past it. Does that make sense? There's so much going to be involved in just winning this fight, because when you fight on events this big, unless you've got a big backing or a name already in boxing, you don't get easy fights. And I haven't by any means taken an easy fight. You know what I mean? The guy was the runner-up from New South Wales to make it to the Olympic tryouts. You know what I mean? So he's hot business as an amateur. Turning to pro, the hype's definitely on him. But I think because I'm so unknown in that space, because I'm known as a boxing coach as opposed to a fighter, I think I'm gonna maybe give them a bit more trouble than they're expecting in this fight. You know what I mean? But it's not in any ways an easy fight. Even if it goes my way completely, this guy knows exactly what's going on.
And do you know much about your opponent?
I'd seen him around before. My guys had sparred him before. He's boxed from a very young age. He's had a lot of years of fighting. I'd always watched him and known he was good. I'd seen him in the amateurs. I saw him in state titles. I'd always known he's a good fighter. I never imagined that I'd be fighting him. I never looked at him as an opponent.
And so what gives you that confidence? And when I say the confidence, like obviously to be booking another fight, kind of like, because some people would say you're overlooking him, right? By booking a fight, I guess, so close to this fight.
Just always the way I've done things. So I fought 4 times in a week once. I fought first kickboxing title I won. 2 weeks later I was on again. A week later I was on again. I book myself out like that. I usually fight in clusters because I find it's just easier for me to get prepped, bang the fights out, and then rest. So I've always done it this way. It's just nothing new for me at all. And
what happens in the case that I say, and I look, knock on wood, but say you take a significant amount of damage, what happens? Yeah, so I let the promoters know that's a big contingency. They know straight away, and they said the same to me. We're not stupid, Alex. We know how it works. If you're injured, we understand. So I would never put a promoter out like that. But let me guess, they've sent you the contract. Yeah. So technically, you signed up to fight on the 16th, but we're just hearing rumors that you're fighting on the 31st. No contract signed yet anywhere. I'll sign him the week of the fight. That's crazy. So I guess, was it just it was just, I guess, an opportunity that aroused, right? Like it's because, as I say, it's a massive card in a sense, right? Like, because at the moment, like, Tim is, I guess, the golden boy of Australian boxing now. Yeah, he's the guy. At the end of the day, when you've been around for a while, like I have, no one can ring you and say, "Hey, do you want to fight in the Newcastle Entertainment Centre on TV, on Tim Zoo's undercard?" You're going to say no? Does that make sense? No way. So, hey, the door opened and I walked through it. You know what I mean? The opportunity came and I took it. Simple as that. I wasn't going to say no. Without doing dollars a cents, but like, you know, is it a pretty penny? They pay significantly more than the local shows, as they should. In the local shows, so when I fight in my own place, in my own suburb in Hornsby, won't even ask for a purse. There's no point. I'll make so much on ticket sales. It doesn't even matter, you know what I mean? I'll just ask for a margin on ticket sales. With these, there's no sense of ticket sales. And there is so many ticket sales that, yeah, they pay significantly better than the next guy. Yeah, crazy. Well, man, like it's one of those things, man. Like as I said, I was like really like, as soon as I heard that you were having your pro debut, I was like, here we go. And then like I had no idea like that it was on the Tim card, right? Yeah. And then I was like, damn, like that's definitely a card to. I mean, I guess it's a card to do your debut on. I mean, if it goes bad, it's a bad card to do your debut on, right? Like it really is that. But your camp's been going well. you're obviously on point in regards to your training, your weight and all that. Like,
Yeah, look, I'm never going to be in a training camp not thinking I can train harder. It's just my mentality. So up until the week of the fight, I generally am always thinking I can do more, just my attitude towards it. But with the way things are going now, with the way how comfortably I'm doing multiple sparring rounds, it's making me confident that my 4 rounds is going to be comfortable. The issue is I've never fought at an entertainment center before in front of that many people and that many cameras and the walkout and all that. So that drains from you in its own way. I'm more working on mentally preparing myself to make sure that doesn't affect my energy levels and my focus.
And who have you been using as training partners for this? I did see that you obviously did some rounds with Ross from Central MMA.
Yep.
But have you been bringing any specifically boxing sparring partners in also?
Absolutely. So I've been doing sparring at 3 places at training grounds in Crow's Nest because we've been getting a little group together there from different gyms. Focus boxing, running always helps me out, always arranges me really good level sparring. And then obviously Central Coast to work with Ross. So me and Ross will punch out X amount of rounds in a row and then he puts me through some pads at the end just to burn it out. But funny, I haven't actually suffered from finding good training this camp. I think being a coach and knowing every other coach, if I turn around and say, hey, can I have a favor? No one's turned me down. You know what I mean? It's lucky when you're not really threatening their guys as a fighter. Does that make sense? They know you're a coach, so they're very happy to help you.
And do you find that the sparring when it comes to boxing is much different from MMA? And I say that looking from the outside, I find I find that MMA sparring is a little more controlled, if that makes sense. Because sometimes when I see these guys boxing, it looks like a full blown fight. Like obviously they're wearing the headgear and everything, which is a little bit of protection. But I just find, I don't know. I find with MMA, like people always say, go 60% or notch it up to 70, 80%. But I find sometimes with these boxers, they're throwing leather 100%. Like, is that?
Yeah. So MMA, I'll always be working at that 50 to 80 range. In air boxing, I'll be working 80 to 100 range. So when we spar, you're going hard. So I'll do a lot of sparring at 100. By the time you got the full kit on, you take shots, but you're not taking big shots. But I can't prepare for boxing not sparring 100. I can prepare for MMA. Like in my MMA fight, I maybe sparred twice, I think, for that whole time. I didn't even spar for that fight. Boxing, I wouldn't dare. I have to get my very hard sparring in before I fight boxing.
Crazy. All right. Well, the last thing that I'm going to kind of bring up, and then we'll see if we can maybe get a question from the old Clubhouse. But I also saw that you're an IMAF accredited coach. Obviously, IMAF is still a little new. So from your kind of perspective, what is IMAF? And yeah, as I said, like once you're accredited, like what does that bring to the table?
So the idea was I did the coaching course initially because I wanted my athletes to be able to compete in the IMAF tournaments, right? The problem was pretty much as IMAF was gaining some traction, COVID kind of happened. So now a year later, I don't really know if IMAF gets built the way they were hoping it to, it will take over the whole amateur scene. Everyone should want to get their fighters into a national team or a world championship setting. I think it's fantastic. You get to fight multiple fights, you get to fight around the whole world. Who wouldn't want to do it? But it just seems like without travel, the whole IMAF model doesn't make sense because it's built on international competition. So at the moment, I'm sitting tight with it. And I really hope they get to rebuild and get to do what's on their agenda. Because if they do, that is such a big thing for Australian amateur MMA. It'd be really important. So I wanted to get involved initially, but then, like I said, out of their control, it's kind of fallen off a bit.
But so what you're saying is in regards to having your fighters fight on IMAF, you have to be accredited. Is that how it works?
Yeah, that was the idea. And to be honest, part of me doing the coaching course is to have a sticky beak as well. It just landed. This was the very first course, and I had to go dig around and see what was going on, who was involved, how it was being run. So a lot of it was out of thinking, okay, if this is as big as it can be or as it is overseas, I want to kind of be involved early so I can sniff it out.
Nice. Well, here we go with the guinea pig experience or experiment, I should say. I'm going to open up the line to the Clubhouse, which you will shortly be joining. And hopefully we'll have some questions coming through. So we'll even see if anyone's got their mics on. So
hello.
There we go. We've definitely got someone online. So yeah, I'm just going to shut up for a minute, and I'm going to throw it to these guys and see what kind of questions they can come up with.
Hey, well, interesting chat. That was really cool. Thanks, guys. You mentioned that, certain types of people are built for MMA, but you didn't really talk about what you think that is. Can you kind of explain what you see in certain athletes that makes them, perfect for MMA?
Yeah, absolutely. Although obviously there's no one set personality or build or mentality for MMA, but there's a certain amount of punishment. For example, you'll take in a boxing fight that you won't in a jits comp, right? In a boxing fight, I need to stay on my feet even if I'm taking damage. In a jiu-jitsu fight, I can avoid physical harm if I don't like getting hit in the face, for example. So I have already two different kind of natural personalities that gravitate towards one or the other. MMA, you just need this special kind of grit, because when you're getting grappled and struck at the same time, particularly when you're trapped in, say, a crucifix or mount position and you're getting your face punched in, to kind of have the personality to fight your way out of that, or to be into a deep submission and be bleeding from your face, and to have the resiliency to hold on. It's just, for me, it's always been a different kind of grit and a different kind of athlete is required for MMA.
Yeah, mate. And is that something that you think you only see, once you put them through some tougher rounds or put them through a hard training session, or can you pick that when someone walks in the gym?
You can pick it in the gym for sure, but you know what? Some people surprise you, eh? Some people on fight night just become this different person, and then some people who are the big gym commander can fall apart with the nerves on the night, become cowards. You know what I mean? Most of the time you can tell it, give or take, in the gym, but on the night, different people become a different person, and fighters become a different person on the night. So if you have that person in you that can have that grit and that tenacity to win an MMA fight, if you don't have it, then a cage isn't where you want to find yourself, in my opinion.
That's for sure. Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, just because I know who was asking that question, I'm sure she'll also have a dieting question for you.
Do I now? Well, I mean, it's always my question. Do you have, a specific diet that you follow, or are you under any of the nutrition fads that are kind of going on, or do you just do whatever?
I think if you're preparing for your first fight, I strongly recommend you get some help with your diet. Strongly recommend. There are professionals that will help you, and there are systems that will help you. I think the person needs to be sport focused, and they need to be you focused. They need to not be something you grab off the internet. Someone needs to know your height, your weight, your BMI. I think when you've done it I've competed since I was 11, you know what I mean? I've made weights for as long as I can remember. For me, I know my body well enough to understand how it works. But if I'm in my first couple fights, get a professional to help you. So many fighters starve themselves because they don't know how to eat, and their performance in the training room is so bad because I'm finding out they're eating 800 calories a day. I don't know who on earth would be able to train and survive on 800 calories a day, but they kind of found out on the internet, if I eat 800, then I can lose weight. And I strongly suggest, if you don't have your own system, of getting it done properly.
And on that, I'll follow up on that one, is only because I had the fight dietitian on there, on the last series. Do you find that when you say for your first couple of fights to have a professional looking into it, are we talking specifically pro? Because when I spoke to the fight dietitian, he was kind of under the, not assumption, under the theory that he reckons that at amateur level, you shouldn't be cutting weight. That was kind of his point of view. So when you're saying the first fights, are we talking pro, or are you happy for your amateur fighters to be kind of cutting weight as well?
Great question. If my fighter's in good shape and in good weight, he fights where he naturally falls. If I get a lot of clients that come quite big, we've had some lose, like for Winter Warrior, we had some lose 33 kilos and 35 kilos. They did it in such a terrible way that they blew up again afterwards in a big way. Just to give you an idea of the value of the fight dietitian, Jacinta's making her pro debut, first time at 52 kilos. She's been working with him the whole camp. He's done her wonders. So I'd never spoken to him myself, but she couldn't praise him more highly. So I'm happy to give him that shout out here.
Yeah, and look, what I got from him, obviously, as well, is I like the fact that I find that there's two types of people in this kind of field, right? And that is, one, they see it as a business, right? And as long as you're willing to pay to have them on your side, they will do what they can, even if it kills you. What I really liked about Geordie when I spoke to him was the fact that he has a very mathematical equation of how he wants to safely bring a fighter down. And if he feels, he was even talking, he's got a clause in the contract with fighters that basically he gets the final say. And if he feels that he can't get you to make weight safely, he will literally say no to the fight. And that is one of his kind of conditions when you bring him on board. And I kind of like that because he doesn't just see it as a pay packet. I mean, obviously he's doing well. He's got the top of the top elite athletes on New Zealand and Australia. But I kind of really like that he, as I said, he's kind of really trying to narrow it down to a science. And he's also very upfront and honest about that. He doesn't believe he knows it all, right? He says, look, we're still kind of in that field where we're trying to figure stuff out, but he's trying to do it in the safest way possible. So that was one thing that I can really appreciate on him.
Yeah, look, like I said, if you're trying to lose big amounts of weight, do it properly. If you're talking, I'm within 3 kilos of where my coach wants me, I probably don't need it. I just need to cut out a few things, be a bit healthier. But when you get, like I said, when I saw those people in my gym do those big crash weight losses, like I said, they were eating 800 calories a day. They made the fight and then all blew up again. And they're so upset with that, they've ended up back there again. I honestly said to him, look, I think it's time you get some proper help with how to actually structure a diet and training, because what you're doing now, eating those low-calorie protein bars and stuff that from the servo, that's not a diet. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and a lot of people see those things as meal replacements.
Crazy.
Right, because I had the same on my series. We had a couple of people, it's like, what do you eat? And it's like 1 protein bar.
Yeah.
And I'm like...
Exactly.
Right? It's kind of like I'm waiting for people to turn up and go, what's your diet? And they're like, the tea diet. What's that? I just drink tea. What, you're not actually eating anything? No, just drink tea, you know? Like... And that's the one thing with a lot of these diets, a lot of people don't give it a fair chance either. And I've seen people and they try a diet, and if they haven't lost 5 kilos in the first 3 days, they jump ship and go on to the next one. And it's kind of like, hey, dude, and I guess that's where a professional helps, because you kind of then put your trust into someone else. But it's kind of crazy. So look, I think we're going to wrap it up, unless I guess I'll just throw it one more time to see if there is any more questions from the Clubhouse. And if there is, speak now. If there isn't, we are going to wrap things up. So it seems pretty silent on the other end, so that's all good. So yeah, man, like for people that, they can't even purchase tickets to your event anymore, right? Like, because I think the boxing card is officially sold out.
Yeah,
so people that want to watch you fight, like where is it? Is it obviously, is it going to be Fox Sports or is it a pay-per-view card, or what's the deal with that?
That's a great question. I've been waiting to find out. I think, look, when it's closer to the fight, it should be all over socials anyway. I'll chuck it up on my personal page. My assumption was at first that it was going to be by Fox, but then I haven't seen any advertising for Fox Sports, so I believe it'll be a pay-per-view style system. Okay, sweet. So on that, this is the time where I always tell people, like, if people want to follow your journey, or if people want to come train at your gym or so forth, or they want to figure out how to watch your fight, what are your socials? Obviously, where's your gym located? All that kind of stuff. If people want to reach out, how do they get in touch? Yeah, man. So the gym, Carioti MMA, is located in Hornsby. You'll always find us from a simple Google search. If you want to track what we're doing, jump on our Carioti MMA Insta. If you want to follow my lead up for the fight, because I'm going to be putting out some more content about things I'm doing and how I'm prepping, jump on alex.carioti, the one you're probably seeing underneath my face during this podcast. Other than that, we're very open for people to come to train. I know Hornsby isn't a central location, but the reason I like that is we have a lot of people you probably never worked with before. We've got a lot of higher belts. We've got pros, amateurs. We've got a good wide range of athletes there. So we love visitors.
Well, there you have it, man. I can't thank you enough. I mean, I say that with all guests, but I really can't, because I know it's always hard, you know, being the first of many, and you've obviously been first and twofold, which is the first of this series, but also, as I said, the first one to try out this little Clubhouse experiment. Look, I wish you the best of luck on your debut. To the point that I hope it all goes well enough that you can actually back it up 2 weeks later. I think that's a heavy task, and I commend you for that. And I think it's a little crazy, but look, we'll see how your journey goes. But man, it's been a pleasure to talk to you. I hopefully get you back at some stage, maybe even after the fight, and we can talk how it all went. Would love to get some of your fighters on there, maybe Jacinta after her fight if she's available. But look, as I said, all the best. Thank you again. And yeah, until then, this is it. Everyone stay blessed.
I'm a one.